All right, guys. So once again, we are back together for a discussion on worldview. Now, let's go ahead and make a few preliminary remarks about my hat. Um, I'm not kidding you. Right now, it is 1 degree away from being in the 40s. Uh, that's degrees Fahrenheit in my home. Our our heating unit was putting off some sort of dangerous emission. They had to cut the gas line to it. So we've been out without heat for a few days. So I'm bundled up, literally cap on, trying to get this work with you guys knocked out and have a good time doing it while we go through these various worldviews, even if I'm freezing. So having said that, that explains my big kooky hat here. All right, so discussion on worldview. Let's go ahead and get into this. What are we talking about today? Well, we've been through various worldviews, right? Well, now we come to pantheism. Now, one of the things that I want us to remember or want us to keep in mind as we continue through this journey in worldview and as we discuss these worldviews is I want you to remember from a couple of the first key lectures that we talked about that remember worldview is how someone is filtering what we would call reality, right? They're looking at the way things are. They're trying to explain the datum, right? The data around them through the lens of their worldview. Now, as we've already seen, this may be more or less consistent with their worldview. So, as I argued in regard to, say, atheism, right, or even, well, I'll use that in a minute, but even with atheism, how I believe that the strongest logical connection between atheism and any sort of worldview would really be something like almost like nihilism, if not nihilism itself, right? Um, Apart from just conceding that everything can be made, everything is completely subjective, right? So nihilism in the sense that there's just no objective type meaning or morality or purposes and teleological notions, right? But the point was that I had tried to argue that in regard to that particular worldview, um, it wasn't that those that held to the atheistic worldview didn't know right from wrong, didn't live moral lives, didn't live even possibly better lives than I myself live in regards to morality. Um, but it was just that they were inconsistent with that worldview. Now, as regarding in regards to logical consistency, as I would try to argue there, right? Now, this is another worldview, pantheism, where I think some of that is going on. Um, More so, really, probably in our culture, in Western culture, since it's tried to adopt and encapsulate some of these pantheistic principles, pantheistic ways of viewing things. Um, and hopefully, what we're going to try to point out here is that we're going to see a lot of inconsistency, a lot of logical inconsistency between Western practitioners of a lot of the pantheistic beliefs as they try to live them out, so to speak. Now, I don't think there may be that logical consistency um, in the East, or where a lot of these things originate. However, even that's slightly misleading because a lot of times when we hear these remarks about pantheism, we almost want to say that that's completely Eastern in its origin, but that's not true, as we're about to see here. So let's continue to go on. Now, pantheism, as I just mentioned, is obviously a worldview, and it's a very particular type of worldview. But it's there are all sorts of formulations or variations of even what we would consider to be the pantheistic worldview. Um, Buddhism is usually some form of a pantheistic worldview. Hinduism is some form of a pantheistic worldview. There's philosophical pantheism, such as that was put forth by Spinoza, or even Hegel had a type of pantheism, um, and even Plotinus in the third or fourth century AD had what we would call a Greek form or a Western form of pantheism. So again, you start to see here with this philosophical types of pantheism that it's not necessarily just an Eastern notion. A lot of people want to say that pantheism, oh, that's just Eastern. Well, it's really not. The West even has a long, very long, very ancient tradition in pantheism as well. Again, going back to Plotinus, seen in Hegel and in Spinoza, or rather Spinoza then in Hegel, right? So I hope I just didn't get that backwards there. I'll have to go back to our history of philosophy there, won't we? But anyway, the point is just that there are various formulations here, and it's not necessarily monopolized by just one particular demographic, right? It's not necessarily monopolized by just one specific region or culture. Though, admittedly, the earlier forms of Western, say, pantheism have kind of gone out of fashion, so to speak. And that's probably to the rise of things like Christian monotheism, right? And its dominance in a lot of Western cultures for centuries. Even though that's starting to wane now, it had taken on something like a position of dominance for a long time in the West. Now, a lot of the ways that we see this pantheism, as I was remarking earlier, a lot of the ways that we see this here now in the West is through this last point here on the slide, is these various forms of what we would call something like New Age mysticism. And this really, when we talk about postmodernism, we talk about trying to nail Jello to the wall. This New Age mysticism is a lot like that. In fact, one of our texts, I believe, goes into some dealings with New Age mystical type of thought. Even still, a lot of the pantheistic notions, it may be even a form of pantheism, especially when it gets down to the claim about what God is like, God being one, you are God, I'm God. This book, the philosophy of the classics is God, right? This pen is God in some sense. Whatever running across the yard over there is God. So just anything and all things are God, right? So you would probably see something like that type of pantheism, or that type of expression of pantheistic belief in something like a New Age type belief. So even with that said, a lot of the critiques, or even a lot of the points that we might make in regards to some of these other more traditional types of pantheism may fit with that as well. So you can just kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we work through this. Now let's continue on here. I want to read this to you because I'm going to lean heavily on a thinker like Geisler here in this, right? You've got people like James Sire, you've got people like Geisler, you've got a lot of authors that are writing about these particular topics. You've got our texts, obviously, which can exhibit that, which are beneficial, by the way. Make sure you're following along in the text, staying with the text, because again, these lectures are pretty much going to be the highlights. A lot of or at least run parallel with what you're getting in your lecture or getting in your text. So we want to make sure that we're staying devoted and disciplined in that. But let me read you, having said that, let me read you this by Geisler here. There are differing types of belief within pantheism. An absolute pantheism is represented by the thought of the 5th century BC Greek philosopher Parmenides. In fact, that was a philosopher I didn't even mention, right? I mentioned Plotinus, who was 3 or 4 centuries AD, right? Well, Parmenides was actually before that, right? Now, the thought of 5th century BC Greek philosopher Parmenides and the Vedanta school of Hinduism. And then you see his clarification there. He's just remarking in another section you can check in that particular text that I pulled this quote from. Absolute pantheism teaches that there is only one being in the world, God, and that all else that appears to exist actually does not. Another type is emanational pantheism, something like an emanation of something, right? Which was set forth by the 3rd century AD philosopher Plotinus. According to this view, everything flows from God in the same way a flower unfolds from seed. There's also the developmental pantheism of Hegel. Hegel viewed the events of history as the unfolding manifestations of absolute spirit. Now, that's just absolutely, again, when you take the history of philosophy course, if you've already taken that, wow, that's all I can say in regard to that version of pantheism, that every particular event, every person that rises to power in some sense, like a Napoleon, All these sorts of people were manifestations of the absolute spirit manifesting itself throughout history. If that sounds crazy and convoluted, don't worry, it is. Now, where was I? I got so caught up in that, right? So Hegel viewed the events of history as the unfolding manifestations of absolute spirit. The modal pantheism of the 17th century rationalist Spinoza argued that there is only one absolute substance in which all finite things are merely modes or moments. The multi-level pantheism is found in some forms of Hinduism, especially as expressed by Radhakrishnan, right? Or excuse me, Radhakrishnan. This view sees various levels of manifestations of God, with the highest level manifesting God as the absolute one, not absolute one, but absolute one. I'm trying to stress the term differently there. And lower levels showing him an increasing multiplicity. Now, even here, we have to be careful because he's saying him, right? But remember, in pantheism, there is no, God is not a him or a she or a, it's really even misleading to say it's an it. It just is, right? God just is in some sense, right? So this wording here is a little, even from Geisler, it's a little misleading there in calling and saying him, right? You've got to get those are Western notions supposedly of God, right? You've got to get that notion out of your head. So primatial pantheism is the view popularized by the Star Wars movies of George Lucas, right? In which the Force, the Tao, or Tao, depending on how you pronounce that. Some say Tao, some say Tao, and then each accuses the other of not saying it correctly, right? Now, the Force, which penetrates all things, this belief is found in, again, Zen Buddhism, right? So again, and then there's your reference if you want to check that out at some point. Now, you can see already, you're like, whoa. I thought pantheism was going to be something like theism, like that you've got, something like Judaism, Christianity, Islam, just something like that. Well, obviously, this is very, very, very complex. It's a very convoluted type of system. You've got all types of different variations and formulations of this kind of belief. So remember this: like there's a textbook, and I can't recall if we're using it right now or not, called "The Universe Next Door" by James Sire. And one of the things that he points out in his particular observations is that, and again, this is true for anybody when we're trying to find out their worldview, what they believe about ultimate reality, right? But especially true in regards to pantheism is that you've really got to talk to the person that identifies as a pantheist in depth and in sincerity, because you really can't say, oh, well, they're a pantheist, so right off the bat they believe X, Y, and Z, right? Now they may do that. In fact, that's what we're going to try to concentrate on in this lecture, is the things that they at least hopefully in most part would all share. But as this long quotation here that we've got here points out, you've really got to be careful because there's just so many variations of this particular worldview. And you really got to get down to the meat and bones, so to speak, of what the person actually holds to that you're conversing with. So let's go ahead and try to look at some of the things that are congruent with many forms of pantheism. Now, I've got these mapped out here, and again, these are going to be more or less accurate, depending on again, previous slide, who you're actually talking to. But what I've tried to do, and again, taking my lead heavily here from a thinker like Geisler, is to try to boil these down to some of the basic points that each pantheist is going to hold to, regardless of the school of thought that they're in at the moment, or not at the moment, but the school of thought that they actually hold. So God, right? These are the things we're going to talk about here, right? So God, reality, like what is real or what is the universe, God's activity within creation, what is mankind, what is humanity, right? So if we're thinking in terms of like if we're thinking in terms of our worldview questions, right? Those just big overall categories that we've gone to every lecture thus far, origin, meaning, morality, destiny. We're already, you see, kind of overlapping or looking at those types of questions through that lens already. So in contrast, like atheism, God, there is no God, right? Reality, what is real? Material, right? Matter is what is real. Physicalism, right? God's activity within creation. Well, there is no activity of God in creation because there's not a God, right? Atheism would say. Mankind, well, we're just the byproduct of the evolutionary Darwinian natural selection, that process, right? So, but pantheism is going to actually, radically differently. Just as radically different as, say, the theistic worldview would be, but it's going to be hard for us, again, because we don't think in these concepts that we're about to explore here. So what, for the most part, would most forms of pantheism hold in regards to God, right? Now, one of these, as we already mentioned, is that God is going to be everything, right? God is not like the theistic conception of God. God is not personal. God is not other than, in the sense that there is a God and then there is a creation that is distinct from that God, right? So Christianity, a theistic worldview, would say that God is transcendent in the sense that he is over and above creation and sustains it and all those sorts of things, but he's immanent in the sense that he is involved in his creation, intimately involved in creation, right? Now, pantheism is saying that God is immanent in the sense that he just is all that we see of creation, right? So if you see anything in regards to creation, again, this book here, the pen, whatever it was that ran across the yard, you, me, this hat, all of us, your computer, whatever you're viewing this from, everything just is God, right? It's just either a manifestation of God. It's just, again, according to the school of thought, it's just a manifestation of God in some sense. It's an emanation of God in some sense. Or, as we're going to see a little bit later, in some of the more pure forms or more strongly philosophical forms of pantheism, it's just an illusion, right? So that whatever exists just is God. And even if those that would say that reality is an illusion of some sense, what we think of as reality is an illusion, like this duplicity or multiplicity, I should say, of whatever things that exist in reality, those are actually just illusions. But all pantheists are going to agree that whatever really truly exists just is God. If it exists and it's real, it just is God. Again, how they cash that out may be different, whether it's a manifestation, an emanation, or an illusion. But whatever really is there just is God. This is why, again, you've kind of heard the more popular type notions now of, people running around on these movies and documentaries and whatnot, where they're just standing there. I am God. I've come to the realization that I'm God. This sort of stuff that most of us would cringe at, when we hear. So another key attribute here, another key component, something that's congruent with these forms of pantheism, is that God is not personal. Again, in contrast to, say, the Christian conception. So I have that here actually written this way. I put personal. Now I have beside that non-personal, that God is non-personal. But I'm afraid that even that may be a little misleading to say non-personal, because again, I'm trying to, difficult as it is to try to think in categories that are foreign to our current thought process. So I put personal, meaning there's no such thing, right? It's not just personal or non-personal, but that's just not even something that's in the ballpark. It's just, hopefully you see how hard time I'm trying to express that is just personal, just no, like there's just no personality involved in any sense of the word, right? Now, they would also say, again, when we get into depth here in regards to these pantheistic notions of God, that God is just beyond logic, right? Not that, now this is a super important distinction. It's not saying that God is beyond logic in the same sense that, say, a Christian theist or someone would say that the Trinity is beyond logic, right? Because the Christian theist would say that the Trinity is not illogical. That is to say, it doesn't break any rules of logic, right? One God, three persons. It would be illogical to say that there's three gods and not three gods, right? Or that there's three gods and there's one God, right? Or that there's three persons but there's just one person, right? That would be illogical. It's not illogical. It doesn't go again, it doesn't break any logical rule, logical principle to say there's only one God but three persons. But the Christian theist, if they hold to that belief, would say that that is not illogical, but it's beyond logic, right? It's not unreasonable, but it transcends the finite human mind to be able to completely comprehend or grasp that kind of truth. Though it doesn't go against logic, it is over or beyond our logical capability, so to speak. Pantheism's not saying that when it says that God is beyond logic. It's saying that logic doesn't even apply. Like logic as a category, if I can use this loosely here, as a mode of communication, as if that's all that logic is, but we're just saying that for sake of simplicity right now. But if logic is a mode of communication, it doesn't even apply to God. God is not just beyond it. It doesn't even work in relation to God. Contradictions can be true, and if we talk about God, right? According to this type of sentiment. True notions and false notions can be true, right? Again, true when we talk about God. The law of identity doesn't apply. The law of excluded middle doesn't apply. The law of non-contradiction doesn't apply. None of these things have any bearing, have any domain or jurisdiction when we talk about God and the ultimate and the one and all these sorts of things, right? Now, again, you see how that's in contrast to something like a Christian theist, under their worldview. They believe, obviously, that logic does apply to God, right? Like when you talk about God, you're talking about God. You're not talking about something else. It's the law of identity, right? The law of excluded middle. Either God exists or God doesn't exist, right? And the law of non-contradiction. Christian theists don't hold that God is contradictory in nature, right? God is truth, right? God doesn't contradict his own nature. Not just that he doesn't, but he literally can't, right? It would be nonsense. It would be illogical. So again, notice that they, even though the theistic worldview would say something like God may be beyond logic, but he's not illogical, this is making a much more radical claim. God, it doesn't even apply, right? It just doesn't even apply. Logic doesn't apply. Now we're going to evaluate that. We're going to look at that as we progress in a moment. Now, obviously, as a consequence of that, it's beyond intellect, right? Like when we express these truths about God or these things that we want to claim to know about God, and as it pertains to pantheism, that this is a completely non-intellectual exercise, so to speak. The only way to do these sorts of things, to contemplate the divine in some sense, is to paradoxically, and I'm using paradoxically there in a very charitable fashion, I want to say contradictory. In a contradictory fashion, the way to contemplate the divine is to not contemplate at all, right? Is to let go in the sense of meditating on nothingness, right? Or as some might say, some pantheistic gurus and teachers have said, contemplate the sound of one hand clapping, right? Like just these, what we would call just paradoxes, right? And that's to use the word charitably. Some of us may say just try to contemplate nonsense, right? Again, but you see, though, how this relates to this beyond logic, or this non-applicability of logic, this beyond intellect, this non-applicability of intellect, just this whole domain over and above and transcendent, and just this just defies all any ability to cognitively express anything or think anything in regards to God. So God is completely impersonal, apersonal, really. God is everything, and everything is God. Logic doesn't apply, intellect doesn't apply, all these sorts of things, right? Now, another key here would be something like this, right? That reality, what is real, what is the universe? Now, again, it helps to try to think of these in terms, answer these questions, or think of these questions in terms of how various other worldviews would answer, right? So again, atheism or materialism, right? Physicalism would say that what is real, well, what is real is just whatever exists physically, right? Like the physical is what is real. Of course, theism would come along and agree with that, but then also say that whatever exists, uh, whatever physical is real, obviously exists. But then there are also these spiritual realities, right? Like God exists, right? Or lower level beings like angels, demons and whatnot, and then obviously humans and their soul, right? Souls exist. These whatever exists is physical, but then there are also things that are not physical that exist as well, right? Now, again, we're getting into very deep water and just completely tripping over ourselves here when we talk about this in regards to pantheism. Note, though, again, see how just radically different what a worldview can make in the life of an individual when they're used to or not used to thinking in these kind of categories, right? I mean, some of this not sound so foreign to not just your ear, obviously, but just to how you're trying to process some of these things. Again, like we talked about in the first couple lectures, like ideas have consequences, right? I mean, we really start to see this when we go through these various worldviews. So when we talk about reality in regards to pantheism, again, well, all pantheists are going to agree that whatever is real is God, right? If it really is real, right? Sounds a bit silly to say what really is real, almost redundant, but whatever really is real just is God. Now, the distinctions or maybe the arguments that may come in there would have to be, well, what is real, right? Is everything that's not God, right, or we don't recognize as God, is that really just an illusion of some sort? Is that just non-existence of some sort? Um, Again, or is it just a manifestation of God in some sort? Is it just an emanation of God in some sort? Are all human behaviors, are all events, not just human behaviors, but are all events, like again with Hegel, is that a manifestation of God? Is that real, so to speak? What is, right? What is real? Now, obviously, with, say, something like a theistic type of belief, there's going to be this belief that God creates out of nothing, right? The Latin is creation ex nihilo, right? Creatio ex nihilo. And the pantheist is not going to think that there's God, so to speak, and then that this God creates out of nothing. But again, that it just flows from God, or it just is God, something like that. That either just whatever is real flows from God, or whatever exists just is God. So there's none of these conceptions about reality being created, right, or the universe being created by God in some sense. Now, again, like Guy, I think you're like Geisler is going to say that something like absolute pantheism, or what we would call something like a pure type of pantheism, is just that the reality itself is just is some sort of elaborate illusion, right? That that the universe itself is it's not even a manifestation. Again, it's just a very elaborate type of illusion. We've got to rid ourselves of the illusion, right, and bring ourselves back into uh, oneness with the one, right, in some sense, or the void, as in like Buddhism, right? Now, if that's what creation is, or I shouldn't say creation because there would be no creation in the strict sense that theists would mean it, or that even atheists would mean it. Um, if that's what is real, well, then what would this kind of God's relationship be like with creation? Well, you're probably already seeing exactly what that would be, right? Well, wait a minute. What do you mean? What would the relationship of this kind of God be in regards to creation if he just is his creation? And you'd be immediately on track, right? So God's activity within creation, say like miracles, right? Well, there just are no miracles. Well, why not? Why are there no miracles in pantheism? Obviously, I've got the slide here. I kind of don't want you to look at that and cheat, but if God just is reality, if God just is the real, whatever that is, if it's a manifestation or emanation or whatever, um, forget the illusion part of it. Whatever really is real is God. So that means that God can't interact with creation in the sense that he's here and then here's creation here and then he interacts or performs a miracle in this creation over here. Well, if God just is this, well, then there's just no interaction in the sense of what we would normally think of in regards to miracles, right? Because God is already doing, as you see how I've written here on the slide, God is already doing because he just is. So in one sense, God's not doing anything, but in another sense, God's doing everything because it just, whatever is God, right? So it doesn't make sense to think, or again, we see how just radically foreign it's hard for us to express this, right? Our conceptual schema, right, in our mind is just so oriented in a different way of thinking. It's hard for us to think like this. But there just are no such thing as miracles in the sense that there's a God over here, creation over here, and then God jumps into this creation. Now, you may be thinking, well, wait a minute, I know Buddhists and I even know Hindus that have, that practice some sort of religion where they have these gods or whatever, and they pray to these gods to do things, right? True. One, so 2 points in regards to that. One, that shows the importance of actually knowing what the person believes that we are discussing or conversing with, right? Or that you are conversing with or talking to. You want to know what they actually believe. But two, we're talking about the purer forms of pantheism, right? The more consistent type of form of pantheism, those that would hold to this more consistently. But then actually there's another third point that we can say, and that would be just simply that it's kind of hard, even if you've been taught a certain way your entire life in regards to some particular worldview, it really is, no matter our culture, no matter people's culture, it really is hard to shake this idea that there's something different about some things than me, right? Especially when we're talking about something like God, right? Even if we want to call them, like these other cultures might want to say demigods or lesser than types of gods or something, there just still seems to be something that's more than myself, right? There seems to be some sort of almost intuitive truth that's floating around in our noetic structure somewhere that tells us, that whispers to us like, yes, I'm God. But you know what? I really don't think I am. I'm going to pray to this thing over here, right? Again, that's an issue of psychology that may be worth investigating. In fact, our text may go into that some, but those are just a couple key points to remember there. So long story short, in regards to God's activity in regard to the universe or what we would typically call creation, it's just a meaningless question on pantheism because God just is his creation. God just is already being involved in creation in the sense that he just is, right, creation. And that, again, I'm even using confusing terms when I'm saying, remember, I'm saying he is, but again, those don't apply. He and personal pronouns, all that doesn't even apply in regards to pantheism. Now, what are we? Now, this is a really difficult question to try to get to when we talk about pantheism. Again, it's easier to answer this question if we think of it in terms of how other competing worldviews might answer this. So when we talk about us, right, and again, say in regards to atheism, well, we're a conglomeration of atoms and molecules that have come together, for some purpose, or no, not really some purpose, but for whatever reason or another. And theism, obviously, you are a composite of body and soul, right? So you would either be something like a Cartesian dualist, right? You a body and a soul in some sense, or you're something like the more classical approach to that would be like something like holomorphism, right? Like you're a composite of form and matter, right? Soul and spirit. Like there's genuine composite. They're not just distinct like this, but they're really interrelated in some sense. But pantheism is not saying that, right? Even the existence of your soul or having a soul is just not the same thing. Um, in pantheism, even if you would hear a pantheist talking about the existence of a soul, um, it's just not the same conception, again, that you would think of from the Western point of view or from the theistic type of view. The soul, so some would say it this way: Atman is Brahman and Brahman is Atman, right? Now, that is to just say the real part of you, uh, not this lowly manifestation of body and whatnot, is just in some sense, again, God, right, is connected to the one, right, is trying to get back to either union with the one, even though that's somewhat misleading, or as in, say, something like Buddhism, is trying to go into the void, right, nirvana, right, this extinguishment of the soul. Um, it's also important to remember that a lot of times within various forms of pantheism, that there's, again, the soul is not personal, right? So it's not as if your body dies and then you are like, oh, I'm free from my body. And there's no you, strictly speaking, in that sense. It's not a personal type thing, again, because God itself is not personal, right? It's personal. Um, it's almost like all things flowing into a river, right? There's one popular parable. I can't recall if it's in the Bhagavad Gita's or if it's in the Upanishads, but it's basically a guy's looking into the river, and the point being that the mother of his face, the mother of his face, the face of his mother, and the face of his father start to just flow and blend into one, right, into one. The face of his children, the face of his mother, the face of his father, his thoughts of a tree, his this and that. All of these things just slowly blend and flow, and they just become this one as the river flows, right? And then, of course, all things, like, so imagine anything that you could possibly think of, just flow into the one. They just flow into one another, right? So even this conception of us as people, again, the question would be, depending on the various form of pantheism, is it a manifestation, right? Are people just manifestations of God in some sense? Are they just emanations of God, of it, the God, in some sense? Or are they even just illusions in some sense? Or when you think you see people, are you not even seeing the real, right? So far as you can't see the soul, again, behind the person. Are they God? Are we real? Are we here in some sense? And again, it's really difficult because we're talking about the use of personal pronouns. Um, Even, say, for instance, Buddhism would even go further in saying that they would promote something more like what's called mereological essentialism, that you are just a collection of all these different experiences and all these sorts of things, even though the you there is impersonal, that there's no such thing as a you that's having the experiences. The experiences are just what the multiplied experiences and this, that, and the other just make up the thing that you would think is you. Now, once again, some of you are probably just scratching your heads, right, or just banging your head on your desk, right, just trying to figure out what on earth, like this is just craziness, or this is just crazy talk. Again, that's because, well, one, it may be craziness or crazy talk, but then it's also too, we're not we don't think in these concepts, right? We've got a certain way of thinking that's so foreign to these sorts of beliefs, right? These sorts of ideologies. Again, ideas have consequences. Now, I want you to really, again, pay attention to your text here to go into depth here. I'm just trying to highlight some of these things. Now, I'm really debating if I want to go ahead and talk about this aspect here about meaning, um, or if I want to jump back to this slide here and continue to talk about mankind in relation to reincarnation, right? I think that I'll just go ahead and stay with the order of the slides as I have them and talk about that, the whole aspect of reincarnation and whatnot, and when we talk about destiny and whatnot. Now, there's already some overlap, right? So as we go through a couple of these key topics, we're already seeing at least a little overlap in how we would, or how the pantheists might try to answer, or at least how we might try to understand the pantheists might answer some of these key concepts, right? About origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. But while we're talking about the human person, I think that it would behoove us to go ahead and mention here, as I have highlighted in yellow, the meaning aspect of what it means to be a human person. Well, again, this is going to be dependent on which particular school of thought you're addressing or that you're interacting with in regards to this pantheism or pantheism. But a lot of the meaning or the purpose of the person, even though again it's just misleading to even say things like person in the strict individualistic autonomous sense that we normally think about that. But the meaning or the purpose of that person is to be reunited in some sense with the ultimate, right? With all things, right? To be reunited with all things, all that is. Think of the river that we talked about. Think of the face of your mother, the face of your father, the face of your children, the trees, the nature, all just flowing into just this one, that there is no distinguishing between mother. There is no distinguishing between mother and father. There's no distinguishing between child and parent. There's no distinguishing between the nature and the person contemplating. There's no distinction between any of these sorts of things, right? So the goal in some sense is to get to that, right? In some sense. And these are usually achieved by, various means of enlightenment, right? Again, think of emptying one's mind through meditation, contemplating on nothingness, releasing these concepts of logic and reason. And when we try to talk about it, when we try to think of nothingness and all this sort of thing, right? Now, one of the odd things, and we're going to see that it seems to be a point of contention. It's a difficulty, one of the more difficult aspects of pantheistic thought, if we haven't seen some already, is this idea of karma, in the sense that people are supposed to do these good things, right? Karma, of course, being karmic debt, meaning that every event that happens is in some sense the way in which you're paying off the karmic debt of a past life in some sense. Now, the weird aspect about this, one of the weird aspects is there is no personal you, right? Like even when you die and say you are reincarnated and you're on the karmic wheel, it's really difficult to reconcile why you should pay off the karmic debt when it literally, in the most literal sense of the word, was not you that committed the whatever in question, right? This deed or whatnot. It seems like that karmic debt would really only make sense if you're talking about a real personal you that transcends each particular body, that has its own mode of consciousness, right? That it's not someone else, right? So a lot of times people are confused because they think in the West, because they think that you literally, when you die, you're reincarnated as if it's, as if you're just switching bodies in some sense. But that's not what this means here. That's not this true pantheistic notion of going into, paying your karmic debt. It's not you. When you die, right? This non-personal, apersonal something is what is paying off or going through this karmic cycle of birth and rebirth and paying off various debts and whatnot. But this is how pantheism, this is in some sense the ethic of pantheism is karma, right? Again, in opposition to, say, something like sin, right? That human beings in a theistic worldview, they come into the world, they're bent towards doing the wrong, bent towards evil in some sense, just to put it bluntly, and they do wrong things, and so therefore these wrong things are called sin, right? Whether it's robbing or stealing or so it's the same thing, or committing adultery or lying or harming others, that's a sinful action, right? And then they themselves would be held accountable for that sin, right? For that wrongdoing, either um, at judgment, right? Or by God, um, unless they seek forgiveness from God, right? And are granted forgiveness from God. But in regards to the pantheistic sense of this ethic here is this karmic, this notion of karma. Now, one of the things I'd like to point out, one of the radical inconsistencies where we see in the West, again, maybe in this New Age type of mysticism, New Age spirituality that tries to incorporate these pantheistic notions, one of them being karma here. A couple just personal examples. I was sitting on a what could roughly be called a beach when I was a lifeguard with a fellow lifeguard. And I did this for years. I was a lifeguard for years. And so I was sitting with this guy and he was talking about, we were having these, kind of quasi spiritual conversations. And he was talking about how his wallet had been stolen, right? And, he's a real upbeat guy, nice, cool kind of guy. And, I was telling him, oh man, that's a bummer, And he was like, well, I'm not really too worried about it, man, because, karma is a beep, and, whoever stole my wallet, man, like karma's going to get them, man. Right. Well, as I was sitting there, I was just thinking about that. And I was like, well, wait a minute. And I was like, you do know what karma teaches, right? He was like, that's right, man. Like they did something wrong, man. And now they're going to have to pay for it with karma, man. And so, I was like, well, wait a minute though. You got your wallet stolen, right? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, well, wait a minute. According to karma, you got your karma. Right? Your wallet was stolen because you're paying your karmic debt, right? Whatever, like all these things that are happening to you that you don't like or that you're experiencing, whatever, like that's just your karma come to call, so to speak. And he was like, oh man, yeah, I didn't think about that, right? And I was like, exactly. I was like, it seems like that most people want to employ or use this term karma when something bad happens to them. And kind of point to the other person that karma is going to get you. But guess what? Karma just got you because whatever happened to you, you must have been guilty of, right? In some sense in your previous life or whatever. And so now you're just like anybody else is paying off their karmic debts. Another example of this, I had a philosopher friend whose kids were in South America and their valuables, some thieves and whatnot had broken into their car, stole literally everything they took with them, all their luggage, all their money, all their possessions, everything. And a woman had commented and said, oh, wait, don't worry. What those people did was terrible and karma will pay them back. But again, remember, and I remarked to the woman, I said, remember, if karma is true, then this philosopher friend of ours, his children got exactly what they deserved. They're paying off their karmic debt. Now, that seemed to be lost on this woman. She was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, if you bother to think halfway about it, you see that the implication is that if karma is true and whatever happens to you in this life is the result of being on this karmic wheel, this ethical karma, this ethical system of karma, then that whatever happens just is karmic debt, right? Another example, I was talking to a guy who was a relatively new father. And tragically, he lost his child, a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old that he lost due to cancer. And this individual was talking about how he was essentially either exploring or becoming Buddhist, right, in his belief, right? And he had previously expressed his belief in karma. And I said, but wait, and I knew that the situation was right in the sense that I knew him well enough to be able to say something like this. And I said, but wait a minute, look, so you're telling me that you believe in karma, right? You believe that whatever happens in our life is we're paying off our karmic debt. He's like, of course. And I was like, what about your son? What about the 3-year-old, your 3-year-old that you lost? Do you really hold the belief that he deserved that he was receiving his karmic debt? That what happened to your son, this awful thing that happened to your son, and obviously count millions of children, did they deserve that? Did they actually deserve that? That was they were paying off their sin, right? Because of things they had done wrong. Do you really believe that? And, obviously that really hit him very hard. Obviously, I mean, that just goes without saying, it's obvious it hit him very hard. And that really, I'm going to say, to put it lightly, seriously he called into question, the validity of something like that. Now, that doesn't mean it's not true. But if you're going to embrace something like that, that's something that you're going to have to stare down, right? You're going to have to be willing to look that dead in the eye and either embrace that or reject that, right? It's not something that you can just dismiss. Now, having said that, this whole idea of karma, this is something like the ethical system of pantheism. Let's continue. Let's keep moving on. Obviously, that's going to entail, again, let's just go back here. That's going to entail this aspect of morality here, right? So if we're looking over here at morality, this meaning, this ethic, this karma is going to roll right into that aspect of morality. Now, we've already sort of mentioned this, or not sort of, but we've already talked about this at least in some depth here. But your destiny is to work off your karmic debt, right? And these pantheistic types of beliefs. Now, obviously, the way that you would work that karmic debt off is to be perpetually reincarnated until you work it off, right? But again, you see the misleading notions here because I'm saying things like when you work it off, when you die and when you are reincarnated, then you work it off. But again, these are misleading because you're really not even talking about you in the sense that you think that there's a you. There just is no you. In fact, the goal, the destiny of humanity is to, either whichever school of thought you're looking at, either unite, something like in Hinduism, unite with the one, or like something more aligned with Buddhism would be that you would just completely cease to exist, right? That you just vanish. So one of the examples again is imagine the candle just being snuffed out, like you cease. Right now, we're not talking about annihilationism in the sense that maybe some theists would think of annihilationism, right? Like that God puffs you out of existence, right? But we're talking about you cease to exist in the sense that, again, go back to something more like the river type of example. Like there's just no you. You just vanish into the void, right? Now, it's really, really difficult to contemplate and to think about. Another way that we would talk about this reincarnation or how we reach enlightenment is through the relinquishing of desires, right? Now, and again, that's going to depend on which school of thought you're talking about in regards to pantheism. Usually under some sort of Buddhistic concept of pantheism there, Buddhist concept. But that you have to relinquish all desire. So desire is the people are not happy. People are suffering because of desire, right? You want what you don't have, kind of thing. Now, I think there's obviously something to be said for that, right? But at the same time, it seems like it would just be self-defeating to say that, well, you have to desire to get rid of desire. But if you desire to get rid of desire, then you can't not desire because you have to desire to get rid of it, right? Also, it seems like that the result, our problem, is just a little more substantial than the fact that we just want some things that we don't necessarily have, right? I mean, if we're using it just carte blanche like that, just all the way across the board, well, then you really shouldn't desire to have any sort of personal relationships, right, with your mom or with your dad or with your children. In fact, there's been multiple examples of some of these pantheistic practitioners, say some Buddhism, some within other systems, that they relinquish, just give up all relationships with their children, with their spouse, in their effort to just let go and relinquish all desire, right? To try to reach a more enlightened type of stage, right? To unite with the one, or to just be extinguished into the void. Right. This is the destiny of mankind, is to try to get off the karmic wheel, so to speak, by paying off debt through the process of reincarnation. Right. Now, before we get to that, I want to touch on this aspect that many have pointed out before, and that is many say that pantheism just shipwrecks on the problem of evil. Now, evil and that concept, right, when we talk about evil and whatnot, is one of those things that we talk about in regards to, like, any worldview has to answer that, right? Any worldview is going to have to answer this charge of what do we do with what we would normally consider to be evil, right? But pantheism really seems to struggle here because, again, if everything is God, and everything that happens is God in some sense, everything that's real is God in some sense. Uh, well, even the most evil acts, right? Even the most heinous things, even the things that would, you know, turn turn your stomach, make your blood boil. Even those are aspects of God, right? So you think of the yin and the yang, right? There's a little good and evil, and a little evil and good, and there's just mixed match. You think of the symbol there with the yellow and the white and the black there. Pantheism really has a very difficult time in regards to evil because, again, according to some particular schools, is that even though you're supposed to do these good things that work off this karmic debt, once you reach a stage of enlightenment, like true enlightenment, you see that these categories of good and evil don't even really exist. That ultimate being transcends good and evil. That true enlightenment goes above and beyond these lower categories of what we would normally call good and evil. Now, that may sound good on the surface. That may sound, spiritual or fluffy or whatever you want to, however poetic or however you want to say it. But to be honest, I just don't think that's satisfactory. Another personal example. I was in a conversation at a coffee shop with an individual who was identifying as a pantheist of some sort. And this guy, it was kind of a mix of this new age kind of stuff with some Buddhism and whatnot. And he was saying these sorts of things. He was saying that, well, good and evil, those are just lower levels of thinking. Those categories aren't ultimately real. You've got to transcend those types of categories in your thinking. And so it just so happened that week, if you've got any young listeners in the room, you may want to take them out at this point. Go ahead and just push pause. Let them, or some people that are sensitive to violence done to young people, you may want to take them out of the room at this point. Just there's your warning. So go ahead and pause it if you need to do that. So I was talking with this individual, and that week, it just so happened in my hometown, a 6-week-old child had been sexually molested so bad, so horribly, that the law enforcement officers that had gotten to the scene said it was the worst thing they'd ever experienced in their life. And these guys weren't, rookies on the job. These guys, one of them was the chief of the sheriff, right? He said it's the worst thing he's ever experienced on the job. And this was front page news. And so when I'm conversing with this guy, there's others that are, sitting around listening to the conversation. And so when he makes another one of these claims that good and evil are just these lower level types of categories, right? That they're not real. You've got to reach a stage of enlightenment that transcends that type of thinking. I just reach over and get the newspaper clip that had been laying there for a couple of days, and I just plop it right down in front of him. And he looks at it, and he knew this was well known in the community, so he just looks down at it, kind of looks off to the side, and I said, "Is this evil? Truly, absolutely, really evil? Or is there some category where this isn't real? This doesn't even apply?" And he became obviously a bit flustered. He said, "Well, I'm not going to say I don't like this. I can look at this and not like it." And I said, "But I'm not asking you if you like it. It's clear you don't like it. It's clear none of us like it. But I'm not asking you that. Again, that's like it'd be like us sitting here arguing about ice cream flavors. I'm not asking you your personal opinion. Is this wrong? Is this evil, despite what any of us think about what are our personal opinions, right? We're not talking about our subjective notions of what we like or don't like. Is this really, truly, objectively, or absolutely wrong?" Without missing a beat, he said, "I can say this person is sick." And I said, "Well, that's just a statement about his own psychology. Again, that's not a statement about whether this is right or wrong. And even when you say that he's sick, what you're essentially doing is you're just playing a word game, a language game here. It's a matter of semantics, and you're saying that he's sick because he's doing something that he ought not to do. Right? He's doing something that's not normal in some moral sense of the word. Right? That he's doing some sort of behavior with connotations of morality that's not normal for people to do, and you don't like it, and so that's therefore sick. Right? I said you're playing semantics again. Can you say that this is evil? And he got up, stormed off. And I sat there and said, if you've got a worldview that won't allow you to call something like that truly, objectively, absolutely, unequivocally evil, then excuse me for my bluntness here, but to hell with that kind of thought system. I don't think that that's a mark of enlightenment. Right, so obviously my cards are really coming out on the table here, right? I don't think that that's a mark of enlightenment to be able to see those sorts of atrocities and not call them evil. I just don't. Now, you may have various pantheists, and it's logically possible that there's one listening to this right now and said, well, hey, look, I'm a pantheist. I would call it, well, great. But there are those that try to be consistent with that particular worldview in that vein of thought that aren't doing that. And so again, ideas have consequences. So with that, rough aspect, let's keep moving here. Let's keep going on. What are some odd implications for religious belief, right? All right, so a lot of times you might hear practitioners of pantheism, they like to say things like, well, all religions are true, right? Well, because again, remember, if something really is real, then it's just true, right? There's only these manifestations of or emanations of God. And so if there's some religious path that needs to be taken, then you don't need to convert other people to your religious path. You just need to be the best practitioner at your religious path, and you'll end up being at the one, right? You end up to God, right? Again, there's a lot of equivocation going on there about what it means when you say God. Obviously, the pantheist is talking about what they mean by God, right? Not what you mean by God, not what your neighbor means by God, right? Not what the atheist means, right? So you've already got that. But it sounds very nice, right? And especially right now in this Western culture that's really big on this, at least at the time of this recording, on this revisionist view of tolerance, right? And tolerance means to accept all beliefs as equal and valid, right? That everything that you believe is just as true as what I believe, right? Now, imagine then, therefore, you have a belief system, specifically a religious belief system, that wants to come along and say, well, hey, look, all paths lead to God. They're all just as valid as another. And a lot of pantheism, pantheistic type beliefs would try to make that type of claim. Well, that just fits very nicely within this culture that's enamored with this revisionist definition of tolerance, right? But there's some key problems here, some pretty bad problems. So let's just look at one of them. It's one of the most obvious examples here would be something like this. Now, if you're familiar at all with Christian teaching, right, then you would know that something like John chapter 14 says Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through him, right? So Christianity just openly expresses the fact that it's an exclusive belief system in that sense, right? Christianity just doesn't hide the fact that Jesus, right, that this Jesus is supposed to be the way to God, whether you like it or not, right? That Jesus is the way to God, right? Again, he even expresses himself, John 14, that I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one man comes to the Father but through me, right? So if it just openly expresses this exclusivism, right, then that supposedly is not going to fit very well, obviously, within a culture that's wanting to hold to this revisionist view of tolerance, right? That all beliefs are equal and valid, right? So that view, that Christian view there, would be considered to be exclusive and therefore intolerant or wrong in some sense, or ugly in some sense. And so, hey, let's look over here at this pantheistic notion that says all religions are correct, right? But there's a big problem here. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that there's a pantheist that says, hey, look, all religions are right. Well, we're about to see a major problem. if the guy, let's say that there just is a pantheist that's going to claim that holds to that, and he's trying to be consistent in some of these other, in regards to some of these, the congruence of some of these topics. If he's going to say that, well, look, all religions are right, what he's saying, think about this, what he's saying is that Jesus was wrong. Because remember, if Jesus is teaching in his religion that the only way to God is through him, and that pantheism and all these other isms and all these other faith systems, all of those are false so far as they're making claims about getting in right relationship with God. If that pantheist is right, that all religions are actually right, well, then Jesus had to be wrong, because Jesus was saying that all the religions weren't right. Does that make sense? If the pantheist is right, that means Jesus had to be wrong, right? Because Jesus was saying that all religions weren't right. But now the problem gets a little more odd, right? Because this is something almost self-defeating, right? It gets a little more odd. Well, how? Because if Jesus was wrong, as must be the case if the pantheist is right, well, then now the pantheist can't even say that all religions are right, because if Jesus was wrong, well, then the teaching of that religion is that Jesus is right. But if Jesus is wrong, well, then that religion can't be right. So it just, you see, it starts to just fall, that whole statement starts to just completely fall apart when you think upon it critically for less than 5 minutes, right? If all religions are right, well, then Christianity has to be wrong, because Christianity says that not all religions are right. But wait a minute. If Christianity is right in saying that all religions are wrong, well, then, right? See, we've got another problem there. It just won't hold up logically. It just won't hold up to critical thought, right? So usually the answer here is to do something like just dismiss logic. Hey, look, see, this is what we're talking about. Logic doesn't apply. We've just got to get rid of logic. It just doesn't apply here. You just got to get rid of it. You're trying to incorporate these Western notions of critical thought and logic into the discussion, and you just can't do it. But remember, we've gone through this before. You can go back to the first or second lecture when we talk about the evaluation of method or agnosticism and whatnot. Maybe I think it was under agnosticism or skepticism. You can't dismiss logic, because when you dismiss logic, you have to use logic, right? Again, in order to deny the law of non-contradiction, you have to utilize, you have to employ, you have to assume the law of non-contradiction. When you say you shouldn't use logic, and I say, well, why shouldn't you use logic? And then you give me reasons why I shouldn't use logic, well, then you're using logic, because that's just what it means to say, here's my conclusion, and here are the reasons why you should believe my conclusion. That's just an argument. That's just a syllogism, just in an improper or informal mode, so to speak. You're using logic. You're literally creating an argument of some sense. You've got some conclusion that you're trying to get to. You're giving reasons to get to that conclusion, which just means you're using logic. You literally cannot even get around employing logic. And so this is one of the closest thing you're almost going to get to a silver bullet in regards to a major problem in the heart of pantheism, is this just complete denial that logic applies to God. Now, again, the odd thing here is that pantheists want to make all sorts of statements about God, right? Pantheists want to make all sorts of truth claims about what God is or isn't like, or what religions are true or what aren't true, or if karma is true or not true, or what methods you should practice in regards to enlightenment. All of those statements, all of those claims, all of those things imply a use of logic and reason and intellect. You can't use your intellect to talk about what God is or isn't, or that God is everything, and then immediately say, and none of this applies. Well, then none of it makes any sense, right? You can't believe any of that. There's no reason to believe any of that, right? You're literally sawing off the branch that you're trying to use this entire time. To say that logic doesn't apply to God is just a logical statement about God using the principles of logic, namely the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, and the law of excluding middle. You're using three of them right there, just in that one statement. Just in saying logic doesn't apply to God, you're using three logical principles just to even make the statement, right? Just to even say something like, I believe that pantheism is actually true. You're using logic, right? You're using the principles of logic right off the bat. We could go into just multiple examples of why you can't do that sort of thing, right? In fact, I even had a lot of arguments lined up to use, or to look at rather, when we look at something like this pure metaphysical monism, that all reality is one, and that anything and everything else is just an illusion, like that reality just is an illusion, right? I had a lot of arguments about that. So I'll just go through some of those quickly. I've already got them pulled up. So if we look at something like this pure form of metaphysical monism, right? The individual, the type of pantheist would say that reality is just an illusion, all these sorts of things. Then I've got a few arguments that I jotted down here that we can look at. So I'll just read these off quickly. If all of reality is one, you may just want to listen to this. You may just want to kind of turn your head and think about what I'm saying. If all of reality is one and identical, and differences are an illusion, then there could be no difference between an illusion and the real. But in order for one to have an illusion, the illusion must necessarily be something different than the real. But if there's something different from the real, then reality is not one. Therefore, the belief that all of reality is one is false, right? And so I've got this labeled out, and I was messing around with the symbolic logic here with this. Now, here's another in the disjunctive form. Either all of reality is one and identical, and differences are an illusion, or all of reality is not one and differences are not an illusion. But if all reality is one and identical and differences are an illusion, then there could be no difference between an illusion and the real. But in order for one to have an illusion, the illusion must necessarily be something different from the real. But if there's something different from the real, then reality is not one. Therefore, the belief that all of reality is one is false. You can pause this here if you want to look at this other argument that I've posted up, that I've written out here. I've got another argument here. That's just in regards to, well, that didn't even have anything to do with this particular class, so you can skip that one if you want. But these first three just have to do with this metaphysical monism. If you want to take a look at those, pause on those. Or if you want, I can possibly even email those to you if you wanted to look at them. But again, just a couple of arguments that I put together that show I just don't think that the credibility of something like a pure metaphysical type monism that we would look at, something more like the classical Western conception of pantheism. But then even some of these other aspects of even Eastern pantheism that would try to say that reality, what you experience of reality, is just an illusion, right? Now, what I want you to do is, again, stay close to your text. There's lots of good information there that I want you to pull out. But then at the same time, think again how pantheism, at least in as it pertains to how we've answered it here, how we've gone through it here, think about that in terms of these questions here. Think about that, how pantheism, again, is going to answer this question of origins, right? Where are we from? Well, we just are God. There's no beginning in any strict sense, right? What is our meaning? What is our morality? How do we get our morality? What is our destiny to go round and around this karmic wheel for millions of years, if need be, to reincarnate, to escape this cycle, to be united with the one, all this. I want you to think of those things. But again, what I didn't list out here, again, think of how pantheism deals with the problem of evil, right? The conception of things that go wrong, truly wrong within the world, and try to really wrestle with how that makes sense in light of that being an emanation from God or a manifestation of God. Or even if it was just to try to say it is God, or even more if it tries to say that that's just an illusion. Again, so that last answer really may be what might sound to be the most plausible. Oh, okay, yeah, that's how we get out of it. It's just an illusion. Evil is an illusion. But again, try to tell that to those people that are suffering that evil, right? Maybe even you at some point, right, have gone through something just horrendous. Was that an illusion to you, or was that an aspect of reality, right? And how does pantheism deal with that? Is that satisfactory, right? So can you live out these pantheistic types of notions existentially, right? That is, can you really live this out? And how does pantheism stand up logically and critically when we think about some of these things, just with the tools of reason, with the tools of logic, with some of these principles of philosophy? Again, dive into the text. You've got a lot there that's good stuff that you need to pay attention to. And next time,